We're about halfway through the Azurite Sea Meta-game. We've had multiple very large tournaments and very dominant, prominent tournaments that have come through now that we've been able to assess and really deliver kind of some exclamations on the metagame from. But today I want to talk about the specific cards that maybe you didn't expect to be successful. Maybe we didn't predict them early on. Maybe no one predicted them early on. Maybe they're cards from a few sets ago that just didn't have the right position to be successful. I think today what we're going to do is break down 11 of the best cards and maybe a little bit more of the current Disney Lorcana metagame. So without further ado, let's get into it. I Won't Give In, the 2-cost inkable song from the Amber Ink. That is a set 6 card that simply reads, return a character card with 2 or less from your discard to your hand. Now, this is a card that, the first time you read it, you're probably like, it's okay. It's fine, whatever, but never really caught on. Same thing can be said for Revive of Shimmering Skies. It was a card that when we first read it, we're like, okay, it does a thing. It's probably fine. It's probably okay. Who knows? We really don't need it. I think I Won't Give In. The determining factor of why the card is becoming good again is the position of a whole new world within the metagame. In most cases, it's very difficult to be a successful whole new world deck. In the most recent tournament, the majority of decks that were in the top 8 of a 219 player tournament were non-Amber Steel Songs decks. They were Amber Steel aggro decks, and some of them were playing I Won't Give In. This is a card that I believe is very well designed within the Lorcana stratosphere. Having this option to, on average, get back a Mr. Smee or a Piglet, things like that that are moving the game forward in terms of lore are phenomenal. But the alternate way of utilizing this card is similar to how Amethyst Steel Doc utilizes bounce cards to bring back Doc from their hand, replay him, draw 2 more cards. I Won't Give In is not a character like Snake or Fox or Befuddle as an example, but it is a song that enables you to get more traction out of your Doc. Ironically, very often one of the ways to defeat Amethyst Steel Doc is just by removing it and getting it out of the way and not really worrying about the other core characters. Getting rid of the 1/3 is very, very important. For Amber Steel, it's actually the opposite. Leaving it in play is probably where it's less likely to hurt you even further. But now with this by design, having a 1/3 Doc go into the discard pile so then we can pick it back up, replay it, draw 2 more cards is a really nice way to keep the game flowing and keep pressuring your opponent by dropping more and more resources. Not to mention, it is a song. Not all of these versions of these decks are playing Aerial, but it is a nice inkable option, very similar to Be Our Guest in the past. Sometimes Amber Steel Songs were just playing, a Be Our Guest in their deck is to have another inkable option off of Aerial. When necessary, you would cast Be Our Guest, but on average, it was just an inkable card that you got rid of that you were happy to pick up off your Aerial. This song, not necessarily the same. Again, we're not even seeing Aerial in all these decks. So this is also a true option here that like maybe we don't even need Aerial, but it is another inkable option, very similar to World's Greatest Criminal Mind, things like that. There's lots of inkable songs that you kind of pick and choose from once you get past the core. This is definitely a supporting cast core, but hey, it showed up. It's been in winning deck lists, top 8 deck lists, and it keeps just reminding people that, hey, this is a set 6 card that I think many probably overlooked, but it's proving its worth within the metagame. Belle Accomplished Mystic. This is a card that, came out in set 4. The Ursula's Return Secret Rare, Super Rare, I always forget what it is a 5-cost inkable, 4 strength, 4 willpower, 2 lore with shift 3, which will to this day still probably not matter. There are not any really great shift targets for Belle. I believe there isn't anything that costs less than 3, and the 3-cost one is fine, but it's competing with a lot of really good cards in the Amethyst core already, so therefore you're not really seeing that Belle get any play. The other option here is, of course, the ability of Enhanced Healing. When you play this character, move up to 3 damage counters from chosen character to chosen opponent character. So why did it take 6 months for this card to finally get its just due? I said this a couple weeks ago in the meta report, or maybe it was in the guide for the Ultimate Meta Guide, where every single person that read Belle when she came out, I think we all agreed that the card was good and it had a lot of worth. The problem was we played in a metagame for so long that challenging really didn't happen. There wasn't like a willpower line that kept characters in play on average. So it was very difficult to even set up a world where Belle would even make sense. And because of that, it didn't feel worth paying 5 ink for a card that you would maybe never get their ability from. But now, much like Genie, Elsa, who we're also going to talk about in a little bit, there's a lot of characters in the Amethyst package that are just sticking around and living. Even cards like Snake, like Fox, that are kind of doing the same thing. Even on occasion, a Mr. Smee that sticks around for a couple turns has this ability. There's a lot of Sapphire cards with high willpower that are sticking around. There's so much damage also being left around on opposing characters. I think one of the most missed things about this card is the idea that Elsa can come in, take something out, and then, it's sitting there with damage. Well, the cool thing about that is that if they have a more threatening card than the Elsa in play, you actually have the ability to play Belle, move the damage from the Elsa over to the other character and banish it. I think that's a play that not a lot of people are seeing on average. So definitely something to think about when you're playing your Bells. I think this card's phenomenal. I think it's always been good. There just wasn't a position for it. I also think that we kind of put ourselves in this place where you see a deck for so long and you look at a card like Maui and you're like, oh, every Ruby Amethyst deck has to play 4 Maui. So there's not enough room to mess with the 5 call spot. I think more and more now you're seeing less Mauis. You're seeing more Elsa. You're seeing Elsa come in and, be in that other level. But now you're seeing, hey, maybe I don't need 4 Medusa. I don't need 4 Lady Tremaine. In some ways, Belle acts as an inkable Medusa and Lady Tremaine. It's the same situational concept. For Medusa, I need to have a character with 3 strength on board to remove. With Lady Tremaine, on average, I need my opponent to only have 1 character in play to get the card I really want. Belle is another option to saying, all right, I need damage somewhere so I can banish the card that I want to banish. It's just creating that toolbox of options in Amethyst decks to give you even more removal. Definitely her time to shine, and it's honestly been really fun to play the card. So definitely a A+ on this one for it finally catching up to this metagame. Kit Cloud Clicker. This is a 3-cost 2/2 with 1 lore, and Sky Surfing is the ability where when you play this character, you may return chosen opposing character with 2 strength or less to their player's hand. Now, this is a card that obviously has seen play pretty much since the existence of it from set 3. It's definitely a card that has consistently shown up in decks in some numbers. But now, more than ever, it feels like this is a card that's very potentially one of the better Emerald 3 drops. Because once you get in most matchups now where we're going to turns 1 through 5, against Amethyst decks, this card removes almost every card that they play back to their hand. When your opponent pays 4 to play a Genie, yeah, it feels great because they got to come in and play, they drew a card. But when you play play your Kit Cloud Kicker and bounce their Genie, it does take away that wonderful 1-2 punch of Genie and Elsa to come in and kind of take things out of play. So that does remove that entirely. It also does, it's a bit of a time walk. Like, yeah, they draw a card. I get it. It's not the greatest thing ever, but it's still saying like, hey, you can't ink that Genie. The one thing that was like a problem with Kit early on is that when you're on the play, when you play Kit, on average, you're getting rid of a card that they're probably just going to ink. So you just gave them back their ink, which is great because you still gain this huge uproar in tempo, but it was very hard to go above curve or above rate on it. Now saying I can pay on my turn 4 after you play your Genie, I can play Kit and then a Cursed Merfolk or another 1-drop like Diablo, etc. All of a sudden you're like, all right, I'm going to put 2 lore into play and I'm going to take your character out of play. And there's just a lot of cards right now that are 2 strength or less. Genie, Elsa, Ursula's, Diablos, Tipos. There's so many more, if I'm being honest. Ariels, the list keeps going on. Where when you position yourself to get that much tempo out of it, that's where Emerald's being successful. On the games, on the play, with cards like Kit Cloud Kicker, you're really able to just kind of like just take over the game completely and never look back. It also gives you the option on the draw that when you are behind in games and your opponent is a little ahead, it gives you that, that tempo curve of going, okay, let's get rid of this card. bounce it back to their hand, give myself a little bit more time, take some lore away from them. It does fill a lot of roles. And I think Kit is one of the cards that's going to hammer down a lot of particular cards in the metagame, very similar to the human Sisu that comes in and removes one strength characters. Kit itself is kind of keeping in check some of the less than 2 strength characters in play as well. So definitely a card moving forward. When you're playing against Emerald, you just got to know that you can be Kit pretty much at any given time. Raya the Kumandra Rider is a 4-cost inkable, 3 strength, 3 willpower, 2 lore with the ability, come on, let's do this. Once during your turn, whenever a card is put into your inkwell, you may ready another chosen character of yours. This can't quest for the rest of this turn. What is Raya doing? Why is it impactful? This one has definitely showed up from time to time within the meta reports, but this past week it was showcased in a Sapphire Ruby deck. That's a deck that is putting lots of ink into its inkwell, and there is no limit to how many times this can be done in a given turn. If you want to ready a certain character, 2 or 3 times, that's totally possible. The One of the better options I've seen so far is if we play, our Popsicle on one, a Tipo or an Azurite Sea on turn 2, play our Grammatala on 3. All of a sudden, what we can now do is on turn 4, play Raya, seeing how far I go with Grammatala. Look at our 2 cards, ink one, put one in our hand, ready our Grammatala. Now we can even challenge with our Grammatala, which is very notable that we can just do that. We can run it in to a guy, take it out. In most cases, those trades are favorable to where we're not losing our Grammatala. And then we can just do our normal ink return and ready the Tala again, and it be protected from just being picked off or challenged back. This is something that can definitely come up. It's not even that crazy to even really state because of what Raya is now encompassing. It's now what she's giving you the ability to do. It's also obviously very formidable with Maui Sharks, with regular, Maui Hero to All, things like that. It's now kind of just giving this way for many cards in your deck to be act as a scar, if we all, the Vicious Betrayal, I believe it is. The 7 cost comes in, challenges, ready, challenges, things like that. That's what this Riot is now kind of giving Ruby Sapphire as a way to compete with more aggressive strategies early on. I think it's a card that will find homes in other decks as well moving forward, but it's nice to see that this card, as of recently, has been getting more and more hype, more and more talked about. I think it's going to be a standout in the metagame for sure. Another card that has come up recently in Sapphire Amethyst decks, along with Ruby Sapphire decks, is Basil Practice Detective. The 1-cost inkable, 2 strength, 1 willpower with 1 lore, with just support from set 5, is definitely a card that is probably mostly overlooked. In most cases, support as a keyword is very overlooked. It's just a card that we don't really ever respect on often. In a little bit of the ways, I believe in the Shimmering Skies metagame towards the end, Chicha was a card that came up a bit with support. But what Basil can now do for Amethyst decks and Ruby decks, for all that matter, is utilizing characters like Elsa. All of a sudden, your Basil can now, on your turn 5 or your turn 4, most likely, we can now play our Elsa, exert our opponent's Genie, then quest with Basil to support our Elsa. And now our Elsa will straight up 1-for-1 trade with their Genie. We don't need 2 characters running the Genie all of a sudden because support is giving Elsa 2 more strength, which is definitely a very interesting mindset when you're trying to get the most out of your characters, because a deck like Blurple needs to get the most out of its characters because it doesn't have a board wipe or protection like Be Prepared like its Ruby counterparts. It also doesn't have the same type of removal as Steel, but it does have its own Let It Goes and Hades and things like that. This is just another complement to those concepts. The same thing goes for supporting a Tipo early on in the game. Sometimes if we can just take our Tipo, make it a 3-2 instead of a 1-2, all of a sudden it can start challenging much better things and getting much more favorable trades out of our cheaper cards. And the fact that it's also a 2-1 does mean that you automatically have a way to represent damage against Ruby Amethyst, and they are Flynn Riders and Sisu combinations. They're not just automatically going to get things for free because you have a way to kind of prevent the first Flynn from going off, which I think is a big deal. This is a card I do expect to show up more and more now that it's been a little bit more put out there. Other decks have kind of seen it. Other players have been able to see it. Utilizing this 1-cost 2/1 that is inkable. So when it's bad, it's bad. That's fine. We just ink it. But when it's good and the support keyword, when the support keyword is good, it's very good. And in most cases, it will catch opponents off guard because a lot of people just aren't even familiar with the support keyword at all, even though it's been in the game since the very beginning. Pluto, guard dog, the 4-cost inkable, 1 strength, 5 willpower, 1 lore with bodyguard and the ability good boy. While this character has no damage, he gets +4 strength. Yes, this is a card that we have talked about before. It's a card that has not come up in huge numbers, but what it has done is that it still has represented, a nice supporting cast card. Very often, bodyguard very early on in the game was very powerful. It really did come in. It protected some of the better cards in the game. If we go back to, the 2-cost Zimba 2/3 bodyguard for Amber. I mean, that was one of the most prevalent cards for the first couple sets. And then, as time went on, we picked up other cards here and there, Donald Duck, Baloo, the Prince for occasion, things like that. But Pluto is the first one that feels like it is very above rate. A 4-cost 5/5 that's inkable. I mean, that's just hard to come by. So the idea that he also gets to protect your singers, protect, your high, heavy hitting questers and things like that, or even some of just your characters that you just want to keep safe. This card is doing a very good job of that, and it's very difficult to interact with it. Steel, obviously has the very cheap way and interesting way of just getting rid of something. But for the other decks, they normally have to run something into it first and then lose that card. So it is kind of annoying for them decks. Even Ruby Sapphire. Ruby Sapphire has to just particularly run a Tipo into this just to put the damage down. It means their Tipo didn't do anything else. It means it didn't trade with one of your 1/1s or things like that. They had to sit on it and it had to be there. But often, your deck is so well designed to protect its characters that Tipo probably doesn't exist. So now Ruby Sapphire just has to play a Maui right into your Pluto, and now it's a 1-for-1 trade, and that's phenomenal for you if that is their turn. If their turn is pay 5, run Maui into your Pluto, you feel really good about that turn because it means you have everything you want still. They paid more to get rid of your cheaper card. You did its job, protect itself. You get to move the game forward, and you got rid of a card that was kind of a problem for you in past metagames. So Pluto, very happy guard dog, very good at doing his job, and he doesn't even need to come in high numbers. 1 or 2 of these in your deck to play when necessary because he's inkable. Total win across the board. So for those of you who've been following along, if you look right there, yeah, right there, that is a coupon code for a discount off Metafy. TFM Lorcana-TFM 2025 will get you 25% off a limited amount of things. This is a limited code, so act fast. If you're one of the first people watching this, you have the best chance of doing that. There are ways to utilize it for sessions, for courses, and for joining the climb tier. We're currently setting a goal for 2025 to hit a particular number. We haven't announced that number yet because we're making sure, but we are looking to hit a pretty nice number and give us a better opportunity to travel to even more DLCs. So if you want to support us, if you want to see us get more coverage on the ground for more DLCs, then this is a nice way for you to kind of get a part of that goal early. It's over there, not over there. But hey, definitely check out the Metafy. Link in the description, link in the pinned comments. If you're fast enough, you can get 25% off whatever you decide to purchase. Thank you guys for all the support. Let's get into the rest of the cards. Doc Bold Knight. The 2-cost, uninkable, 1 strength, 3 willpower, 1 lore with the wonderful ability Drastic Measures. When you play this character, you may discard your hand to draw 2 cards. If this is your first time on this channel watching this video, then I welcome you. If you haven't yet, make sure you hit subscribe, hit the like button for me. But we are the biggest fans of Doc on the planet. I don't care who else you talk to. No one likes this card more than me. The fact that it is now gone from, small archetype that only a certain subset of people play, and it's like mediocre and okay, No. We've gone to full-blown meta. This card is, without a doubt, the meta-defining card for Steel decks right now. It's played in Amethyst Steel. It's played in Sapphire Steel. It's played in Amber Steel. All of these decks now are utilizing this character for what it is, and it is a 2-cost replacement that draws you more cards. Amber Steel and Amethyst Steel are still looking for ways to return this card to your hand to play him again to get more out of him. That's how powerful this card is. It's how powerful it's always been. But now the position that games are coming to, we're having a lot more games that are back and forth, and we're playing what I like to call war. War is exactly what you think it is, guys. When you play with playing cards, you just flip the top card of your deck and you're hoping you beat your opponent off the top. That's what Disney Lorcana is becoming in some situations. On my stream game last weekend at CCS, that's exactly what it was. We went to game 3, we played War. I happened to win War. That is what this card is best at. When you're in your opening hand, not when you're opening, when you're in your, the later second stages of the game, and you're just looking for a card off the top that's going to make a difference, no better card is going to make a difference than this one because you get 2 more cards immediately. Put them down, put 2 more cards into play, flood the board with anywhere between 1 to 5 lore. All starts with a 2-cost 1/3. Card's phenomenal. One of the best cards in the game. It has been since it's printed. It just finally took a little bit while for everyone to catch up to the same belief that I've had for months now. Phenomenal card. If you haven't yet, just play them in, honestly, any steel deck. Hades, Infernal Schemer, the 7-cost uninkable, 3 strength, 6 willpower, 2 lore with the ability. Is there a downside to this? When you play this character, you may put chosen opposing character into their player's inkwell face down. That's right, the Chapter 1 Legendary has made his return to particular Blurple decks. I do believe that this is a card that you could see in other decks as well, such as Sapphire Steel, such as Ruby Sapphire, but they do have better cards on average that are not necessarily needing of this. But Sapphire Steel, which has been coming up and seeing more and more love in recent weeks as we get further into the metagame, which honestly isn't too shocking when you really think about it. Sapphire Amethyst is a deck that's never been truly successful. So to get into a position to where it would be, it takes particular players committed to making it that way. It takes players that are like, you know what, I can think differently. I don't need to play the norm. I'm going to put extra work into this deck and showcase it to everyone to find and start to love and enjoy. Right now, Amethyst does that for so many different inks, but it's really showcasing itself within Sapphire. Cards like Let It Go, cards like Hades are basically alternate versions of Steel removal or Ruby removal, but you also get the ability to ramp as well. Yes, you don't have the freedom of having Be Prepared. Listen, only Ruby does, so you got to make trades and changes based on that. But cards like Hades go a long way to helping out that strategy. So when you see a card like this all the way from Chapter 1 get some love, that does show some shifts within metagames, and it just takes a little bit more time for decks like that to fully develop because you don't have the mass majority of players playing Sapphire Amethyst. You have a very small subset, probably like less than 10%, less than 5%, if I'm being completely honest. So that's why it's nice to see cards like this show up in decks and kind of perform again and kind of take you down that stroll of memory lane where you're like, wow, in Chapter 1, this card was phenomenal. I really love playing this card. Well, here we are going into Set 6 and NACCs, and this card might be a card you might, interact with at an LCQ or set championships coming up. A Pirate's Life, the 6-cost inkable Ruby song with Sing Together 6, which for those of you that just in case you're not sure, it does mean that multiple characters, any number of characters, can exert together to sing this song. Each opponent loses 2 lore and you gain 2 lore. This is a card that has showed up most recently because of Maui Shark, but it's even showing up in decks without Maui Shark because the lore swing is big. It's really important sometimes in these games that once your opponent gets the 17 or 18 lore, it feels inevitable for them to win, specifically all the Amethyst decks that are running around with cards like Goat, with cards like White Roses, Gathering Knowledge and Wisdom, like all of these things that keep coming up are very impactful. So having an inkable song that you can just play for 6 on average to take 2 lore away from your opponent and also gain 2 all the meanwhile is a really phenomenal play in most of the metagames. Again, when we're talking about games that are coming to, both players playing off the top of their deck, this is a card that can make a big impactful swing when you start doing the counts of how many times you need a quest versus how you challenge. And it can really give yourself one more turn that your opponent was not expecting. A Pirate's Life, really good card right now in the metagame. It's obviously very prominent with Maui Half Shark. So anytime that you can combine the two, you're talking about lots of lore swings and lots of ways to just impact the overall race to 20. So in a 1A, 1B situation, Elsa, the fifth spirit, is here and Genie is not. Genie Wish Fulfilled was probably the best card, if not, yeah, it's probably the best card in Azurite Sea in terms of what it really did for the metagame and what it really did for the Amethyst Ink color. But because of cards like Genie is the reason why Elsa Fifth Spirit have the ability to actually finally see play across multiple Amethyst decks. We had seen it in the past with Emerald and things like that, but never to this extent now. Almost every game comes to down to a Genie war, and Elsa is the Elsa of the Genie war. It's the ability to tap opposing characters down when you want to, allowing your better cards like snakes, like Calhoun's, like foxes, like Sisu's, and all those things to just be able to trade into them so favorably, leave damage on the table for cards like Belle to really be impactful. Everything is really coming to the forefront because of this character and this ability. The fact that it's also inkable is incredible. The fact that it honestly leads into a shiftable character is something that hasn't really come up too much, but it has been, in some Sapphire Amethyst decks, finding a way to play Elsa, not the Spirit of Winter as well. So in combination with Fit Spirit, exerting characters, you now have the ability to shift on to her on turn 6, even right on in curve, exert 2 characters down for more than 1 turn, and then quest for 3. So being able to turn your 5-cost evasive threat into a 3 lore, lore machine that exerts things and gets them out of the way, very, very impactful in the metagame. I think if you really start watching streams, if you specifically watch CCS last week, there's so many occasions where you're just like, play my Genie on 4, play my Elsa on 5, exert your Genie, run my Genie and Elsa into your Genie. And then their next turn is, well, I'm going to play my Genie. I'm going to play my Elsa. I'm going to take out your Genie. There's so many of these Elsa Genie just like loops that are consistently going on. I'm going to snake, pick up my Elsa. The game I played on stream, I think in game 3, he played Elsa like 8 times. It was ridiculous. But that's what this card does. It's a wonderful card from set 5 that just, it needed the metagame. It needed the right cards to interact with to be so dominant. And that's exactly where we are right now. Amethyst has just some of the best cards in Disney Lorcana, and this card complements them all so very well, and it also answers them so very well. Last but not least, Lilo, Escape Artist, the 2 cost, 1 strength, 2 willpower, 2 lore with the ability No Place I'd Rather Be. At the start of your turn, if this card is in your discard, you may play her and she enters play exerted. So this is a card that when it was released, everyone went crazy about, and it was for a good reason. But then she kind of fell off a little bit. She wasn't really seeing a lot of play. People didn't really fully understand her. And I don't think it was until Frank Karsten really put her on display during the EU versus NA Continental matchup where he was just like, hey, like sometimes the line is just play 2 Lilos every turn. Build up my hand, let my opponent have to keep interacting with my 4 lore every single turn. And then once it gets built up and once I get my Inkwell built up, I can just be like, all right, well, here's 2 Lilos plus another character. And then here's 2 Lilos plus 2 more characters. Like you can really just present these like never ending atrocious boards because of this card's ability. And Amber loves this. Like we talked about the song to start that brings back a card. This card does it itself on a 2 lore card. I get it. It comes in play exerted. But hey, sometimes your opponent runs out of resources. This is a card that you can't run out of. Aside from it being put back into your deck, which is possible, or being Let It Go or Hades, also possible. But on average, that's not what's going to happen here. They have to continuously run into it. Now, granted, staring in the face of a Calhoun, we're never putting this card back in play. We can't just continuously give our opponent 2 lore whenever they challenge it. That we probably can't do. But aside from that, this card is just great. It's just another way of like checking your opponent every turn and saying, answer this, or I'm just going to go infinite. And that's kind of what a way this does propose. So huge shout out to Lilo. Been I wouldn't say an overperformer, but it's definitely been as good as I think most of it expected, even though it had a fairly slow start to this metagame. So yeah, I covered 11 singles, and I'd love to know, in the comments below, hit me up. Let me know, hey, is there one that I missed? Did I not cover it? I put these guys here because obviously they're also been very impactful. Every one of these cards here I could spend 3-4 minutes talking about. And give them their own self-worth. Maui's Hook is probably one of the more newest ones, but I talked about in the meta report last week how good I think it is in the metagame. All in all, this was really fun, kind of just looking at the metagame, looking at the decks that have been successful, and seeing which cards that were new or at least interesting enough to say, hey, you know what? These are going to make an impact. These are here for a reason. We've gotten to a point in the metagame where people are making educated choices in deck building of saying, this is why I'm playing this card. So it's definitely something that you need to be wary of. It's also something you need to consider. Maybe you haven't played any of these cards on this list yet. Maybe you haven't put Raya into your Ruby Sapphire deck. Hey, listen, right now, we got 2 or 3 weeks before now and NACCs. We got about a month between now and set champs. Right now is the best time. Play random cards. Like, if you're going to league night, don't worry about the 3-0. Worry about learning the lesson so you can win set championships, pick up yourself a mat, and pick up yourself a card. Look for the guy that wants to be the 5-0 at LCQ. Right now, if you can find something that people don't know and they haven't learned about, and you can even get people on it, this is the best opportunity to test and try those things out. Thank you guys so much for watching today. If you haven't yet, make sure you hit that like button for me. If you like videos like this, we do a bunch of these in the beginning of sets and normally about the halfway point, which is where we're at. So you can check out the playlist in the card discussion. We'll have it probably right here if you're already thinking. But thank you guys so much for watching today, and we will catch you in the next video.